I was gonna fix myself before filming this, but I don't really have the energy to do that, so this is what you're gonna get. Hello everyone, my name is Mindy and welcome back to Oh My Growth. I'm in a different location today because I basically filmed this in whatever room I can be on my own without being disturbed for a little bit, and today it's this room, and honestly, I feel like it looks a little bit better here. So maybe I'll try sitting here from now on. Today I'm going to be talking about the attachment theory. You've probably heard about attachment theories before. Well, there's only one that I know of, but the attachment theory anyway. You might know a little bit about it, you might know a lot about it, but what attachment theory basically explains or talks about is our way of approaching relationships and approaching emotions when it comes to different types of relationships. They don't have to necessarily be romantic relationships, although I feel like that's probably the scenario we most often relate it to. But it could be other types of relationships you have as well in your life and just how you approach those situations. Attachment theory, I have some notes here on my phone, was originally developed by John Bowlby and expanded by Mary Ainsworth. I might be saying the names wrong, but it's important to give credit where credit is due. And they were the ones who originally developed this whole attachment theory. Why is it interesting to talk about attachment theory? Attachment theory can really help guide you in relationships a little bit because it helps you understand yourself better, choosing the right kind of relationship for you, and also just finding security and self-esteem when you're navigating relationships. Before we get into the attachment styles we're going to be talking about, there are 4 of them. I do just want to say that while you're listening to this, if you feel like you relate to one of the attachment styles that I'm going to be talking about, but you're also like, fuck, like, I don't want to be like that. That's not who I aspire to be. Oh my gosh, is this my attachment style? Like, what do I do now? I want to just say, like, they are fleeting, and it's very possible to grow and evolve and adapt yourself a little bit when you know more about this kind of stuff so that you learn how you want to approach relationships in the future as well. I used to think that I was an anxious attachment person, but the more time that like passes by, I'm realizing and recognizing that I'm not uh anxious attachment in every relationship in my life because I, as a person, am growing and evolving and learning, and my mindset is shifting. And so I'm also learning how to more healthily approach both romantic, family relationships, and friend related relationships as well, just by learning about myself. So I've learned just in the past couple years that I'm not someone who that's not my personality. I'm not anxious attachment style, like this is me, but it was part of me at one point in time, and it could be part of me in the future again, depending on whom like I have around me, because people, situations, environments, like all of that does affect who you are at the core. There is a theory that we are a reflection of the people closest to us. I don't remember if it was 5 or 6 or whatever, but like the people that are closest to us. And there is some truth to that. You do adapt to who you are around. And if you spend time with a certain type of people, you might also just adapt yourself in ways. I feel like I might be repeating myself a little bit in that sentence, but whatever, you get the gist. They're not fixed. They're shaped by our past experiences, they're shaped by our present experiences, and they're shaped by how and when we want to evolve and grow as people. But it's still interesting to learn about, and that way you can also, in a way, place where you're at right now, and then you can detach from that later and analyze yourself a little, think about who you want to be and what kind of approaches you think might be better for you to adopt in the future. So what are the attachment styles? I'm going to name all 4 first, and then we'll go through them one by one. The first one is secure attachment. In short, this is about basically being comfortable with closeness and also being comfortable with your own independence in relation to your relationships in your life. The second one is anxious attachment, or preoccupied is another word for this attachment style. That one is more about craving closeness and also fearing abandonment or fearing a person leaving you basically and attaching yourself onto them to keep them. Then we have avoidant attachment, which can also be called dismissive avoidant, and that's about avoiding emotional closeness. Also, somebody who values independence in a different way than a secure attachment person does, more about wanting to be independent because you don't want to get close to other people. And then the fourth one is fearful avoidant attachment or disorganized. And this is about having a push pull behavior where you're both scared of intimacy, but you're also scared of abandonment. So you want one, then you want the other, then you might want the other, and then you might want the other again, and go back and forth between that. So those are the four attachment styles. Keep in mind, whichever one you relate to, you have every opportunity to shape that in the future. And we will talk about how you could strengthen certain attachment styles as well as we go through them. All right, so the first one is secure attachment. I feel like when people talk about attachment styles, this is probably the one that people aim to have in the future or are like working towards, which makes sense because doesn't it sound nice to be comfortable with closeness and like comfortable with your own independence and all that kind of stuff? Like that does sound nice in an ideal world. But of course, not all of us are there. I was definitely not there. I probably still am not completely there, if I'm honest. I have certain things that still make me feel insecure in certain situations and everything. So, but it's definitely something I myself would want to work more towards. If you have a secure attachment style, the core traits are basically just being comfortable with closeness and comfortable with independence. You're just comfortable in most situations. You feel secure in yourself and who you are as a person, both in relation to others and what you can contribute to in a relationship, but also how you can contribute to yourself. This is often developed in a person from the start if they have a very secure and stable childhood and grow up with like consistent love and consistent support, then you could potentially develop a secure attachment style from day one, which is amazing. But unfortunately, most of us do have to work towards having that in the future because everyone has struggles. Like, there is no one in this world who gets by without having a single struggle. There will always be something that makes life a little bit tough sometimes. But then, of course, that comes in varying degrees. Some people more, some people less. I had a beautiful childhood. I will say I was very lucky when it came to that, and I had very consistent love from both of my parents, which I'm very lucky to be able to say. But there were other things that played into having some sort of, well, sometimes there were just chaotic situations or situations that did make me feel not as secure and not as comfortable. And so I don't think I developed a secure attachment style from day one, but that is how it is developed. And that is also how it's fostered. Like, if you want to strengthen that part of yourself in adulthood, it is obviously something you have to give yourself in that case. And you can develop a secure attachment by, for example, maintaining healthy boundaries and setting healthy boundaries for yourself, putting yourself first in situations and maintaining that self awareness of who you are, who you want to be, what maybe downfalls you do have within your personality and way of just like living your life. Self-awareness is huge. Having awareness is the first step to any type of growth. So if you want to strengthen a secure attachment style within you, that is where you need to start. So what are some signs in relationships that basically indicate that someone has a secure attachment style? It could be that they trust other people generally. It also means that someone can communicate openly and productively and also handles conflict well, because there will always be conflict in every relationship we have. There will always be conflict, but if someone has a secure attachment style, they're more likely to handle that conflict well and know how to just approach that situation. This does remind me of an interview or like part of a podcast episode that I watched today of Benny and Selena Gomez. And he was basically explaining how Selena, in this case, sometimes gets really fiery and has like strong emotions, but that when he sees that in her, he thinks, okay, but what have I learned that I can like do in this situation that makes her feel better? How does she work? What can I do in this situation to calm it down and not feed into the fire that I can see starting in her. And his way of thinking there definitely gives the indication that he has a secure attachment style. He seems very comfortable in himself, very independent in himself, but he also seems very comfortable with closeness and with approaching her and with doing things in the way she might need in that moment. That's how a secure attachment looks. You know how to just process what's in your body and be able to handle other people effectively and communicate in an open and just nice manner, I guess. However, a challenge with someone who has a secure attachment style could be that they struggle to understand if they have a partner who maybe is a little bit more insecure. If you have a partner who is very insecure in themselves, which a lot of us are, to be honest, but you yourself feel really comfortable in your skin, and you feel very comfortable as a human, you might struggle to understand where they're coming from and not be able to meet them where they need you to meet them in that moment. It's very easy. Like if we know something and something feels very real to us, we just kind of assume that it's real to everyone else around us. And that can really be harmful in communication just because you can't assume that everyone is like you. I had a really interesting conversation in my lecture at school today about that concept a little bit. Like she was explaining how she studied fashion and stuff in her life, and how for her on her news feed and like feed on Instagram and TikTok and whatever, there's so much information about sustainable fashion that pops up, obviously because her algorithm knows that she likes that stuff. So she watches a lot of stuff about sustainable fashion. And so she just assumes that that's how everyone else works. But then the truth is that the like leading fashion brand or whatever is Shein right now. And that's far from sustainable clothing and sustainable fashion. That's what's actually happening in the world more than ever. But at the same time, in her world, that's not true. Like in her world, the truth is that sustainable fashion is the way to go and that's how it should be. And that's just an example, but that's how a lot of us think. When something feels true to us, we think it's true to others. And unfortunately, that is a downfall of a secure attachment because you feel so secure that you might just think that everyone else is, but that's not the case, unfortunately. All other three attachment styles we're going to talk about now are in some way opposite to the secure attachment style. And I mean, just by that, knowing that there's three that are more like insecure attachment and there's only one that is secure attachment, that says a lot. A lot of us are not completely secure in ourselves in relationships, especially at younger ages, but even at older ages. I mean, I listen to my dad and I listen to my mom and I listen to like coworkers and stuff that are older than me. It's not just black and white or easy to go through your life and just feel super secure in every situation. That's just not realistic. But for you to learn a little more about them, let's go into anxious attachment, which can also be called preoccupied attachment style. Now, in the beginning of the episode, I said that this is one that I really resonated with for a large period of time. I feel like this is a pretty common attachment style to have. Basically, it's about craving closeness, craving reassurance, and also fearing abandonment or fearing you're doing something wrong and that you might lose a person if you do something wrong or say the wrong thing. Just being fearful of being alone. This can be developed by being in a situation or multiple situations where you go from being consistently loved to being completely inconsistently loved, and then fluctuating between these different realities. Often, if that happens for a prolonged period of time, you will start to act as an anxious attachment person. That is just the natural response to the warm and cold environment that that gives you. So even if you are someone who has a secure attachment style, if you find yourself in a situation like that for a longer period of time, you might become more anxiously attached to that specific person, that specific situation, or people overall. The signs in relationships of someone who is anxiously attached could be that they're overly clingy, or overthinking, or having emotional highs and emotional lows when it comes to that. Maybe being very emotional, those kind of things, because you are basically in fear of losing someone all the time and you're seeking reassurance all the time. And so that does make you clingy. And the challenge with that is that you can become overly dependent on the relationship you find yourself in or the friendship you find yourself in or whatever it is. And also overly reactive, as in even something small that creates a little bit of doubt in your mind could feel huge for someone with an anxious attachment style, because to them that rings a bell of, oh no, 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 like now you might lose this person, now you might be alone, now you're not getting the reassurance you need. And so it becomes a really vicious cycle of just feeling low and not that great overall. There are ways to heal this. Of course there are. And at the end of the day, it's up to us to heal ourselves or become better communicators and so on. That's completely in our own power and it's up to us to do so. So if that is something you want to do and if you do relate to the anxious attachment style, it's all about building more self-worth, building on your self-esteem and self-love, practicing self-soothing things and practicing self-love, but also developing more secure communication. And despite whatever your surrounding is that has created this feeling inside of you, whether that's through relationships you've had or whether it's through like family situations that you've experienced in your past and in your childhood, practicing you giving out good communication is step one. You'll never be able to control how other people act. That's just a fact. We can't do that. The only person you have control over is you. So that's where everything has to start. So rest assured, there's work to be done, but there's also a lot of success to be achieved when it comes to self-healing from a more anxious attachment style. We're going to go over to number 3, which is avoidant attachment, or another word for it is dismissive avoidant. Now, if you have an avoidant attachment style, you typically value your independence a lot and you avoid emotional closeness because you just see yourself as like a one woman or one man show. Basically, it can be developed in different ways, but if we're looking at childhood situations, it's probably coming from a background of having more emotionally distant caregivers or maybe even dismissive caregivers. For example, someone who has that is likely to develop more of an avoidant attachment style to begin with, but of course that can be grown. And there are many signs in relationships or friendships that you can look out for when it comes to this. But most typically, it's seen as shutting down emotionally and struggling with vulnerability or avoiding having a deep connection with people. Those are some typical signs of someone who is in a situation where they have more of an avoidant attachment style. The challenge with this is that you can come across as pretty cold in situations, and you can also just recognize that you're fearing dependence on other people. Fearing dependence on other people could become a pretty big hurdle to overcome just because as human beings, one of our main human needs, which I've talked about in another episode, is love and connection and having that with people. We need some sort of love and connection in our lives to feel good. And of course, you can find that in many, 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 many different ways. It doesn't have to be a relationship or a close friendship. But if you struggle finding ways to fulfill that need of yours, this can become a pretty big clash. When I was talking about doing this episode today with one of my friends from uni in class, she was saying how she thought she had an avoidant attachment style, but as soon as she was in a relationship with someone who she was really comfortable with, she realized, oh, never mind, I don't have that. And this can be a pretty common thing, actually, that we assume we have an avoidant attachment style when we're single, because when you're single, you're very independent and you're doing your own thing. And there's also a big culture around, I'm so like the independent thing of I'm single and I can travel and I can do whatever I want and I don't have to, I can be out late and nobody needs to know and la la la, like all of these kind of nice things or perks of not having someone else to adhere to. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you have an avoidant attachment style. It could just mean that you need some time to be on your own and live your life. Like there's nothing wrong with that. Go you. But avoidant attachment styles, they dig deeper than that. That's about fearing any dependence on anyone and really like shutting down emotionally in many different types of situations, not just feeling that you need your independence. we all need independence in a way as well. It's nice to have moments of independence. And there are ways to heal from this as well if it's something that you find yourself relating to and maybe want to grow out of, because it can become pretty exhausting, of course, if you feel like you're pushing things away that maybe you want to be able to bring closer to you as well, in a way. But the only way to really heal from it is learning how to trust other people and learning to open up more emotionally to yourself and to other people, but also just allowing intimacy and connection and stuff like that in a slower and a better pace that suits you. Things don't have to go super fast all the time. You don't have to go from A to Z immediately. If you're someone who has had an avoidant attachment style and you're working towards getting out of that and more towards a secure attachment style, it could just be about taking things one step at a time. And you might need to be with someone who has the emotional security of being able to do that for you and be there at the pace you need them to be. So that's avoidant attachment style. We're going to go into the last one, which is fearful avoidant attachment, or also known as disorganized attachment style. Now, this is the attachment style that basically explains push-pull behavior. They most of the time crave connection, but they also fear connection. And so it's a hot and cold environment for them internally. And if it has come from childhood, most probably it's come from a place of having some sort of unpredictable situation when it comes to caregiving or family or home life, perhaps trauma as well when it comes to that in some way. And in relationships, you see more of a hot and cold behavior, struggling with trust and struggling with just emotional stability. And this is more common than we think in people. Unfortunately, there are a lot of chaotic home environments in this world and a lot of people who struggle with a fearful avoidant attachment style. It's not fun to feel like you are in between this feeling of wanting love, because all of us want love of some sort at the end of the day, but also fearing love in a lot of ways and pushing that away when you have love. And the challenge of this is obviously that it can sabotage relationships in your life, which sucks because you might feel like misunderstood by people. And if you're together with someone who, for example, has an anxious attachment style, that environment is going to be a little bit crazy just because the anxious attachment person is obviously seeking reassurance and super much connection and just being with you all the time. But if you have a fearful avoidant attachment style at this point in your life, that's going to be really hard to respond to. You're going to feel very overwhelmed being in that situation. And it's not that anyone's doing anything wrong per se. It's more just like the dynamic, it doesn't work in that scenario. Even being fearful avoidant and being with someone who has an avoidant attachment style is going to create a pretty difficult environment to navigate, because the avoidant person wants to be independent and doesn't want to really connect on a super deep level. But the fearful avoidant person does at the end of the day crave love, like they want love. And this is coming from a place of having had trauma in the past. And so now you want the love that maybe you didn't get at one point in life, but the avoidant person isn't going to be able to respond to that in a great way. Having a fearful avoidant attachment and being with a secure attachment person could probably work, but it's also a difficult environment at times if the secure attachment person can't meet that person where they need to be and can't respond to them in the way they need to respond. So this is one of the harder ones to have and heal from. And in this scenario, if you want to heal from having a more avoidant, fearful attachment, therapy is something I would recommend to anyone in this world. I feel like therapy is actually kind of cool and a lot of people could really benefit from therapy. And there are different types of therapy. It doesn't have to be sitting with a psychologist. It could be different forms. It could be meditation, I see as a sort of therapy as well. It could be having a really, 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 really good group of friends that are really emotionally intelligent and amazing that you can also talk to, that for me is also a form of therapy. Doesn't have to be going to a real psychologist and talking about your past and your life. However, it is something that could be recommended in a lot of situations just because you get to work through what is causing this fearful, avoidant environment in your head and how you can move past that. Once again, self-awareness goes a long way. It's the first step in any kind of growth or any kind of evolvement you want to see within yourself. And that could ultimately lead to having more self-awareness and in turn learning to feel safer in relationships, learning to receive love from people who love you, learning how to give love to people you love. Because at the end of the day, that's what life, in my opinion, is almost about. Love is one of the most beautiful things we have, and connection with people. Even this, talking like this, is a form of connection. I get to talk to you, you are listening to me. That's a form of connection that we have right now. But that's kind of what life is about, all of these interconnected connections that we have all of the time. So if you relate to any of the attachment styles that aren't secure attachment, because that one is pretty much easier to navigate as a person, there are ways to heal that. There are ways to move forward. There are ways to lean more towards having secure attachment and being able to thrive and also enjoy different forms of relationships you have in your life, not living in a stress momentum when you think about them. And I'm saying this coming from having had other attachment styles and having struggled and not felt super secure in myself. I feel more secure in myself right now, but I definitely have a way to go when it comes to my self-growth journey and parts of me that I'm not completely proud of yet. But that's the point. We're always growing, we're always evolving. I hope that gave some insight to you about where you might be at right now in your life, where that might have come from. Now, this might not completely apply. It could be different situations, but where it might come from and also how to heal from it. But also applying this to your relationships in the sense of understanding other people in your life better. If you can look at your partner or your best friend or your parent or your sibling and say, oh, I think they have this attachment style actually, you might know how to approach them better. And if you learn how to approach people in your life the way they want to be approached, like the effect of that is beautiful because they're going to really appreciate that. And that way you can also support them in their growth and their self-healing journeys. I hope you have a beautiful evening, morning, night, day, or whatever it is where you are at, and I will see you next time.